and welcome to Mostly Minnesota Music Podcast Edition. I'm Ann Tracy, and I'm super excited today. I'm talking to Casey McKee. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. I'm excited to talk to you about you've got a new album coming out, but before we even get that far, I wonder if you just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a musician, singer-songwriter from St. Paul. I've lived in St. Paul for most of my adult life, and I was born in St. Paul. So I guess I started playing music when I was kind of like a teenager. I originally started playing bass and keyboards kind of simultaneously, just like a cheap keyboard and like a cheap bass guitar. And then I played bass in a like kind of a hard rock band for a couple of years in like the late 2000s. We played all over the place. And then around 2009 I started doing solo material. The first album I did as a solo artist, I just wrote and recorded everything myself and played everything on the album, and more or less that's sort of been kind of how I've done every subsequent album. Sometimes like a few friends who play music have been able to help me out on the record and playing shows live. But so I've done 5 full-length albums and a couple singles and EPs in there along the way. And then I just did this new album kind of over the last fall and winter, and I did everything myself on that one, just multi-tracking everything in my living room around the corner here.
That's amazing. I love listening to this. I'm going to tell you, it took me back to a little bit before the early 2000s. I think probably late 80s, early 90s. And there were some bands in the Twin Cities, Dark Carnival, and there was like Morticia and some others. And your music reminded me of so much of some of their stuff and some of the other stuff. I would say that if I had to pick a genre and I'd have to mix them together, I would be like swampy goth punk.
I think that's like a very good description of it. I always struggle with like genre descriptions, but I was like in like high school, I was like very much like a goth kid and listening to like 80s bands that were like had long since disappeared and stuff like that. But and like especially with the new one too, it just has like a very sort of like I try to do like a dark edge to it, I guess, or kind of like convey that
absolutely. I mean,
sensibility.
Yeah, there's no question about the dark. I mean, it's which is great.
Thank you for sort of picking up on that too. But yeah, I mean, it was like I guess it was sort of a product of, I mean, that sort of style and those sort of darker overtones were sort of like a product of the time that we all lived through, where it was chaotic and there's a real sense of doom. At least that's certainly how I was feeling. And I mean, there's still that sense right now, but it was like a very immediate feeling, like especially like last fall around that time.
It was dark, and I think people outside of the Twin Cities don't realize, really after all of the George Floyd murder, just that sense of impending doom, and it just because we had curfews on top of pandemics on top of, and whether you were involved in it or not,
I was talking to my friend about it just last night, who actually he took the cover photo for the album band.
Nice.
But we were talking about there were like these sort of in the neighborhood that I live in, there's like looting, liquor stores and drugstores getting their windows smashed, and I think that just came from like opportunism, that there's like sort of this feeling of anarchy, and like the people who had always like sort of fantasized about that just sort of like took,
Yeah.
you know, took the next step. But yeah, there were like emergency text messages going out about, you know, bring your garbage cans into the backyard because they might be used to like smash your windows. So I mean, it was certainly like the most frightening time that I've ever experienced in my life. And sort of in the aftermath of that, yeah, it was just sort of like, uh, how can I express this artistically and musically, not necessarily like in a topical way, which, you know, might not age as well, but just sort of like transmuting those feelings into you know, into songs that, you know, maybe have more universal themes, but sort of have that, you know, feeling of it.
Well, and let's talk about some of the music from the album. Of course I had to start with Alligator because there's the wonderful video for it.
Yeah. So I actually like filmed it against this
I,
wall. Yeah, it was just like
I love, we could be in the same room except I have a light and you don't. We go for some same coloring, I feel. But
yeah,
I recognize that wall from the video. It's great.
yeah, I just kind of like positioned the camera so that, you know, nothing else was sort of in frame, and just sort of shot everything against that. And then used stock footage from things like Wikimedia or like archive.org or something, that was just like a free license, with the stock footage of alligators just kind of doing their thing. But yeah, so that, I mean, that song, I like, as soon as it was recorded, I felt like it was probably one of the stronger songs. I like all the songs on the album. It's kind of like picking your favorite children. I don't have children, but you know, I imagine that's what it's like. But once that song was kind of in the can, I was like, oh yeah, I think this one's pretty solid.
It is. There's something. There's a band that I like, Southern Culture on the Skids, and there were themes of it that reminded me, and they're more like swampy rockabilly, you know. But
yeah, like I've heard of them, but I'm not familiar with their music. I remember seeing their name around a lot, you know, sort of when I was like sort of coming up and stuff like that. But yeah, I'll have to check them out.
there's a real. I mean, they're from Georgia, I think. But you know, the singers got hair up to here, and you know, they've been around for certainly 20, 30 years probably. But they have kind of a real camp appeal to them too.
Yeah. Well, so that song, I mean, this is like a weird thing that that I just heard about yesterday. So so Hurricane Ida went through, you know, Louisiana and sort of the Gulf of Mexico, and so I heard this story, and then just looked it up today, that so that the town, this might have been New Orleans or some other city like on the Gulf Coast, but there was flooding, and this guy was trying to escape the flood, like the floodwaters, and an alligator came out of the floodwaters and like bit off his arm. And like, not to make light of it, but that's like exactly what the song was written about. It was like, you know, like climate change and global warming is like, again, not to make light of any of this, but you know, it's a real problem, and it's sort of being, you know, kicked down the road, or has been for a long time. But yeah, thinking about like something like an alligator or crocodile that's been around for millions of years, you know, in basically the same form, and has sort of like lived through all these different, you know, periods of the environment. Like an alligator might look at global warming with like the floodwaters rising as like sort of an opportunity. And
That's
it
great.
might work out well for alligators and crocodilians. So yeah, and sort of like a wry commentary, I guess, is sort of, you know, what would that be like, I guess. I guess that's what was going through my mind.
And how does, and I have spent most of my life in St. Paul as well. So, but how does a St. Paul kid think about alligators in that way?
It was a conversation that came up about, zoos was sort of what started the conversation with some friends a few months back. And we were talking about tigers and these sort of like, for Minnesota, what are like exotic animals in captivity. And the idea that you look at these animals that are endangered and, from the perspective of someone in Minnesota who doesn't have to deal with like tigers jumping out of the jungle every day, you want to look at tigers as like something that needs to be preserved. And like, I do feel that way, in a very real sense. And I think it's like tragic that, that these animals are going extinct because of human activities. But at the same time, if you're someone who lives in like India, where like a tiger attack is a reality, or like you're going down to wash your clothes in the river and an alligator or a crocodile in India would jump out and, carry you off, there's, I imagine there's sort of like a different attitude towards these animals that are endangered, but also like dangerous. And then that sort of got me thinking about alligators. It's sort of like an Americana record, and like alligators are from the Americas, so it's kind of.
I think that's fascinating. I think that's I was listening to the album I had left, because really just so many images of the music that I loved as a kid. But I mean, I saw Southern culture right before the pandemic. I mean, but from that to this to the music reminded me of when you'd watch surf movies from the 60s, and there was always that motorcycle band that played. That's what you remind me of. The motorcycle band in a surf movie.
Yeah, like Beach Blanket Bingo or something.
Exactly. Yeah. You're not the surf band, you're the motorcycle band.
Well, yeah, there's another, not to jump from topic to topic, but there's another song on the album. It's Walk Again is the name. It's the first song on the second side. And it's kind of like got a weird sort of like 60s girl group like quality, like claps and everything. But in my mind I was kind of thinking of like like a weird sort of like almost like a John Waters type movie, because he'd always do that too, where he'd have like L7 playing, or in the movies that he did, but sort of like this camp sort of rock and roll quality to it.
Well, and that's what the Take a Ride with Me, and I remember when I used to be insane. I'm trying to remember some of the lines from I mean, they're just great. They're just
I was thinking about like sort of like twisted sort of like John Waters girl group mixed with like Captain Beefheart or Tom Waits or something like that.
I've got the thread. I have the thread of it.
Yeah, it all. Well, that's the beautiful thing with music, is you can just sort of throw together any ingredients that you want, and hopefully something interesting will
stick. Yeah. I mean, now I just want to say, and what is this song about? What is this song about? But one of the other, I won't do that to you, but one of the other songs I really like was Mirror, which
the opener.
Yeah.
That was like just a pretty, I mean, it's the same riff that goes through the whole song, and I was kind of like that when I was sort of working on this album. And I mean, up to the present, I was listening to a lot of like John Lee Hooker and Howlin' Wolf and sort of these like electric blues musicians from like the 50s and 60s. But I mean, John Lee Hooker especially, he would just play like one riff for the whole song and like really get a lot out of it. So I think I was like kind of trying to like I was inspired or influenced by that sort of blues sound. Uh,
there's almost and there's almost sort of a some of the songs kind of a labored song, just and I don't mean that in a bad, I mean that in a good way, where it fits the darkness of the music, I think,
yeah.
you know. And I think it was On My Way was the one that because the On My Way was to the point I was always write notes, and I'm like, that's like a goth Irish death dirge right there. The
Thank you. um, yeah, yeah. So that song, the lyrics for it were really sort of inspired by. So I like for most of these, pretty much all the songs on the album, I came up with the music first, and basically like recorded all of the music as it you know as it is on the album, and then wrote the lyrics to go with the music. And I know like a lot of songwriters kind of like do the opposite, where they have the lyrics first. But so I would have this like finished song without the vocals or lyrics, maybe just a scratch melody sung over it. But then I would do the lyrics last, and I was like kind of listening to it, and like I wanted to do some sort of yeah, dirge like lyrics to it. But I was thinking about this movie. It's a Japanese movie from the 60s called Woman in the Dunes. It's like the one of the strangest movies I've ever seen, but that movie sort of like really inspired the lyrics. And it's about this guy. He's like a amateur bug collector in Japan, and he like takes the bus out to this desert and finds this weird town in the desert where they like sell sand, and then he's like captured by this woman, and there's this weird like sexual tension going on, and he's trying to escape, but he also wants to like stay there. And it's like a 3-hour movie or something, but it's like it operates on dream logic. And so I was thinking a lot about this movie, and sort of like I guess channeled the like parts of that movie into the lyrics of just being sort of like, imprisoned, but sort of learning to love the cage that you're in, or something like that. I guess with like the COVID thing too, it was sort of like, went hand in hand with that.
It does in the strangest way. I mean, so that was such an overriding theme in sort of those movies in the 60s,
Yeah.
in a creepy way.
Yeah, they took a lot of chances back then. I think like filmmakers still do now, but mostly what gets made now is like, sort of the big popcorn movies and things like that. But yeah, film has always been like a big influence on me, with like at least lyrically and things like that. Even if it's not like directly, sometimes there's just like a feeling you get from a movie that again, like a lot of movies that have sort of like dream logic, like David Lynch movies and things like that, that operate in this very sort of like profound way, even if you're not like consciously aware of like why they're affecting you. But yeah, anyway.
Well, it's funny because as you say that, I realize that as I'm listening to your music, as I said, just visions would come to but it's really funny. Back and it might have even been the late 80s or early 90s. Sometimes I used to go see goth bands at the Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh, really? Where is that at? Where's the Chuck E. Cheese?
Well, here's the thing. It was in a suburb of St. Paul, so I have no idea because I'm a St. Paul kid. It was late night, and they would have. I don't remember if there were 2 of them or a dozen, but listening to your music was such a flashback of some of this, just the weirdest, or the surf movies or the Southern culture and those kids. But your music does kind of bring you into a place. It kind of transports you to for a while into something like that. So it's interesting to see that that's a little bit how sometimes it evolves or emerges from.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, like I guess like lyrically, I kind of try to like leave things like unsaid in the lyrics, or like have like impressionistic imagery, so that it's not it's not like dictating to the listener like how you have to interpret it or feel about it. And I know, yeah, again, like a lot of songwriters don't do that. Some songwriters have like a more confessional and like personal um sort of lyrical style. But yeah, I always liked, uh like songwriters like Leonard Cohen, where it's, you get a sense, and the language is so sort of elemental and universal that like you get a sense of what the song is about, or the imagery, creates sort of mental images, but then there's a lot of room for personal interpretation to sort of fill in the blanks of it.
Yeah. I think and there were some lines that I really liked from some of the songs, and it's we'll talk about, maybe Tomorrow Might Be Gone in a second, but it was really the sound of the music, the sound of the music, that should be a song. There's really but Washed Off My Skin, live, we could be alive with the sound of Washed Off My Skin. It sounds, I mean, the song seems to start with a scrubbing sound.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's sort of that like, the standard like, pentatonic minor blues riff, but yeah, with there's like shakers and stuff like that too. I guess I didn't do that consciously, but it seemed to fit with it at the time. And yeah, like that. So that song, like I feel like I was trying to like just do like lyrically, I just wanted to do like a lot of like cliches, like there's a train that's coming down the line, sort of like these Americana lyrical cliches. I didn't like take any verbatim, but just sort of like that feeling that you could hear it in like a Woody Guthrie or Hank Williams song or something like that. But yeah, and I was hoping that like with the delivery and sort of the arrangement of the music, that it would have like this sort of like tense, very sort of like looming quality to it. Whereas like if you read the lyrics like just on a sheet of paper, they might sound like a Hank Williams song or something. But with the sort of like minor key arrangement of the music, that it's like sort of a more tense sound to it.
But it's more intense even. It's more pronounced. It's
that's what I was going for anyway. Hopefully it was.
Yeah, and in some songs, in the best of way, it comes off being a little camp, and in some songs it comes out just being really good dark. But it's just it is.
Yeah, like I feel like there's like sincerity in the lyrics, and there's like an earnestness to the vocal delivery, or at least I was trying to convey that. But that there's also sort of like maybe a little bit of a wink, not like snarky or ironic, but just that like sort of a knowing glance, every once in a while or something.
No, it's good. It kind of has the flavor of the era it came out of. It is just a light salting of the flavor of the era that it came out.
Yeah, and hopefully not like so rooted in the time that we live in, that like it couldn't be listened to in like a year or 5 years or something.
Well, and I don't think so. And the one song would be that Tomorrow You Might Be Gone. And again, it's a song that I think, could fit any time, but as a special meaning after 2020.
Well, yeah, and I mean, they're sort of like mortality and death were sort of a large component of the writing of the album. Just like from, there's like the the pandemic that was going on, and you would like hear about these numbers of people that had died, but it was like so abstract. It's like thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. And just to have that sort of in the background, and this, really like feeling confronted with sort of the fragility of life. And and if that wasn't bad enough, then like seeing a person be like murdered on camera, in the town that you live in, it felt to me like it was a year of death, and that like you couldn't, even if people weren't talking about it explicitly, that it was something that was like there, it was like palpable in the air, basically. So that definitely informed a lot of the songs, that there's a sense of, like mortality, and that like the sort of transience of life. And I was kind of like really, while I was working on the album, I was really interested in there's this medieval art movement, like Vanitas and like Memento Mori, and it basically came up in the wake of the plague, like all these different waves of the plague that swept through Europe and Asia. There's like an art movement that grew out of it, and a lot of still life paintings sort of came out of that, where it would be like a rotting fruit and a skull and like a candle that had just been extinguished with the smoke curling off of it. But this was like a huge movement, but it was like sort of a culture's reaction to like sort of massive death and plague. So I was like, kind of like trying to do some research on that sort of art movement, and it sort of like informed the writing of the lyrics in a way, and sort of the tone, I guess.
I think that's fantastic. What an interesting way to go about it. I mean, because I've always said what we should be doing is researching what people, what did people do 100 years ago after the pandemic of 1918. And before then, this isn't the first time we've gone through this. We just all thought we were immune because of our technology.
Yeah, and and it seemed like the idea of like a pandemic seemed like very remote, I guess, to most people, and something that happened in the past and like wouldn't happen in modern times. But I found it very helpful and maybe a little therapeutic to like read some histories about the plague, and like Daniel Defoe, the guy who wrote Robinson Crusoe, wrote like an account of the plague in London that he lived through, I think, as a child or something. As bad as like the COVID pandemic has been, like when the bubonic plague first arrived, 700 years ago or whatever, it was like decimated the population. It was like a third of the population was killed. They don't have exact numbers on it, but so I felt it very like sort of helpful and instructive to just sort of like read about some of these things and see how people have reacted to this sort of horror in the past. And hopefully it comes through on the album.
Yes. It's like, yes, I thought about death the whole time. It is. It does. You do get a flavor of it. As you said, there's a greater universality to it. I think 20 years from now, somebody who's 18 listens to this 20 years from now, is going to have a different view than somebody who remembers going through the last couple of years.
Yeah. Again, like rather than do something like explicitly topical, I've always felt, sort of maybe approaching subjects in like an oblique way, or even if it's something that's going on like right now, sort of taking that step back and like looking at it sort of in maybe in a more objective way, has always worked for writing lyrics. Like I've always had trouble, if I'm going through something, it's like hard to like write a song about that exactly, or to get any like good results from it. So, it just ends up seeming like, like Teenager's Diary or something like that.
Yeah, you will. Yeah, and unless you're Samuel Pepys,
Yeah.
And even Samuel Pepys, you have to read it as a teenager. You're like, not early.
Yeah.
That's
But
great.
good on him for
Yep,
chronicling all those times. And,
absolutely, absolutely.
I think he lived through that plague too, and then the fire. Like, I mean, that was like the big thing, is that he was like, writing as the town was burning down or something like that.
Well, yeah, and thank you for it. Yeah, that's so funny. Do you have plans for more videos for some of these songs?
Yeah. So I've been talking to my friend Dan, who took the cover photo for the album, and we've been talking about some ideas for another video. I would really like to make one. It's sort of just like getting the concept for it worked out. I mean, I would like to do something a little more ambitious, but still sort of like low budget, high concept, sort of. Like, I guess, again, this is just like my own taste, and it's not, to discourage anyone from taking this path. But I found that like with a lot of music videos that are produced like right now, they look like $1 million. It's like very crisp, high definition, widescreen. The lighting, everything. It's looks like high production values, even if it was shot on a small budget. And I always kind of like, those sort of like old like MTV videos that, maybe they were shot on like like Super 16 film or something, but they're, they kind of look, like a little shitty, but like it's fun in a way. You can see like the, the human hand at work, and I mean, that's just like the aesthetics I like, and it like musically or visually, it's like I like a little, roughness to it.
A little Vincent Price edge to the video. Some of that's old.
Yeah.
Bela Lugosi's dead, kind of a.
Yeah, and just kind of like weird. Like I would much rather watch like a weird like black and white short film that, like a student film, than like a big production music video, I guess.
Me too. I mean, I think there's a time and a place, and I'm not, and it's, and Vincent Price isn't for everybody, some of that sort of isn't for everybody, but there's plenty of people who are for it. So
yeah,
it would be fun.
This is like my taste, and my taste is certainly not most people's taste. But
well, as I said, I really enjoyed listening to it all, because it really brought me back to a lot of the music that I love, and I love Americana too. So even bringing in some of that, as I said, just I could hear so many of the influences. It's fantastic.
I'm really glad to hear that you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Now the album comes out September 6th.
Yeah, and it's sort of like an arbitrary date. I guess like I'll post some stuff on September 6th, but I've already sort of gone out to a lot of record stores in the Twin Cities and dropped off the album. And here it is, just for
nice
for anybody who's
nice.
Anybody sees it. But so I've been to like Jaime's and Barely Brothers and White Bear Lake Records and White Bear Lake, and a couple of the half price books around town. So they probably already have it on the shelves, I would imagine. I think they basically just like throw it out. But that was just sort of like an arbitrary date that I like set, hoping that I would like actually get the records in time to actually give them to people and, you know, like put them out. And luckily everything worked out.
That's
Yeah,
good.
there's like a weird production bottleneck with vinyl right now. I think part of it is like a lot of, you know, musicians who had a lot of downtime during the pandemic or like just getting back to it. And then there's also kind of like these heavy hitter, you know, big labels like Disney who are getting like 1 million copies of the Frozen 2 soundtrack pressed to put in Target. So that's kind of like edging out the you know, independent musicians, unfortunately. But I was kind of aware that there would be like a very short window of time that I'd be able to like get all this done and get the order in to get it pressed on vinyl. And I just managed to beat it. Like,
Congratulations.
If I'd waited,
that's
like,
good.
weeks, probably wouldn't have.
Yeah, no, that's fine. There are production shortages in just about every field, right? I mean, it's crazy. So congratulations. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel very fortunate that.
Well, that was good work on your part. Yeah, I think even more important than the release date, because as you say, things are already out there and people can listen electronically and blah, blah. You've got a show, and I will have this up tonight. You've got to show up tomorrow.
Yeah, so I'll be playing tomorrow at the 331 Club. Yeah, so on the bill, I'll be playing with a backing band. I think we go on around 11:30. Yeah, so I'll be playing with Steve Henning, who's a good friend of mine. We've been playing music for like 20 years, basically. He's playing bass. Theo Mack is playing drums, and then Paul Treiber is playing keyboards. And then also on the bill is Andrew Nealand, who's a solo singer songwriter, and then Tom Flip, which is actually a duo. And I've heard one of the guys from that group perform, but I haven't heard this recent the Tom Flip incarnation of it.
Right, that's good. That's part of the fun of the 331. You get to hear lots of different things, so that's
yeah, it's great. I haven't been there in like a long time, and I've never played there.
Awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, the same family that runs it just opened up a new bar down the road from where I'm at.
Well, now I know where you are.
Yeah,
now I know where, because
like,
I did see that you just the White Squirrel. You just played the White Squirrel this summer. I mean, it's only been open this summer, but yeah.
Yeah, so I did 2 shows there. They were both solo shows. And I was lucky enough to play like the first actual show when they opened at the beginning of June. Martin Devaney did like a soft opening, and then the first actual like music show that they did, it was like Laura, the booking agent there was, I had emailed her about playing, and they were like, she was like, well, we really need someone for June 2nd, short notice, but there's like 2 days away or something. I was like, oh, of course.
That's great.
And I walked all my gear over there because it was so close.
Nice.
Yeah, so I played there a couple times. You might see me around there because I just like to go there and hang.
So you're local? Nice. That's fantastic. Okay, so we've got September 6th is the official release for the album. The show is September 2nd, tomorrow. For folks who are listening, I'll add this to the notes. How can people find you online?
So I have a Bandcamp page, which is sort of the official website. And it's Passing Strange Records at Bandcamp. That's just sort of like the imprint label that I've used to put all my music on. I'm the only employee of Passing Strange Records. sole employee. But yeah, so it's there's Bandcamp, there's a SoundCloud for Passing Strange Records, and then there's also a YouTube page. So if you just type it in, basically, probably the first 3 results will be you. Will be
That's great. That's great. Well, congratulations on an awesome 5th album. That's fantastic. And thank you. It's fun to hear. I will enjoy the songs even more having heard the backstory on a few of them. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. And I hope Heather's flooding problems are
Yeah, let's hope.
not too severe.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, thank you so
Thanks.
much for this opportunity.
Thank you.